Hi, it's Emma again with AQUA Real Estate. Our next video is the second in the series discussing NWMLS Form 35. Inspection Addendum. Starting off, we will cover the inspection response process on Form 35R. Then discuss the inspection report clause, before wrapping the session up with the additional time clause. Let's go back to Clause 3 where we left off in the last session. In the previous video we discussed the deadline for the buyer's notice. The deadline is the amount of time the buyer's agent has to send in the buyer's notice. The form designated for this is NWMLS Form 35R, the inspection response form. So, let's take a brief look at what's on this form. The top portion of the form is the area the buyer's agent will input how the buyer would like to respond to the inspection. The buyer has 4 choices. Option 1 is, approve the inspection. If the buyer selects this option, the inspection contingency is satisfied and the deal moves forward. The second option is, disapprove the inspection. This is the one sellers cringe to hear. The buyer terminates the deal and gets the earnest money returned. Option 3 is for when the buyer needs more time to do additional inspections because something came up that needs more attention. The last option is the most commonly selected choice. This is the choice where the seller and buyer enter a negotiation phase and where the buyer asks the seller to complete repairs or receive credits for repairs. Now it's the seller's turn. If the buyer asks for any credits or repairs, then the middle section is where the sellers have an opportunity to respond to the buyer's requests. The sellers also have 4 choices. The first option is, accept all requests. If the seller selects this, then the seller is agreeing to do all the repairs and credits the buyer has requested. Option 2 is, accept some requests. If this is chosen, then the seller will spell out which items they are willing to repair or credit to the buyer. Option 3 is when the sellers are not willing to do anything the buyer asks and wants to sell the house as is. The last option is when the seller wishes to make their own proposal. Say, for example, when the buyer asked the seller to repair the roof but the seller wants to issue a credit for it instead. If a deal hasn't been made already, the buyer gets one more turn. The last section at the bottom is for the buyer's second round. That is the place where the buyer's agent will input how their buyer would like to reply to the seller's response. The buyer has 3 choices. They can accept the seller response. This is the choice when the buyer agrees to the seller's proposal. The contingency is satisfied and the deal moves forward. Or they can disapprove the inspection. If this is chosen, then the buyers have decided not to move forward and have their earnest money returned. The last option is, where the sellers and buyers can continue on negotiating until they come to an agreement. However, the contingency is waived if the buyer does not disapprove the inspection before the deadline, unless an agreement is made first. Looks easy, doesn't it? Well, you must be a genius because even experienced agents have a tough time with this one. The form in itself is easy, but there are a lot of moving parts to keep track of. I highly recommend to check out our other videos covering Form 35R. Just head on over to AQUA University. Keep an eye open for our inspection response scenario videos. We do some role play that cover tricky scenarios agents often find themselves in. Watch these so you can avoid some common mistakes. Let's kick off our next topic, the inspection report clause. The inspection report clause can't be any more clear. It states that the buyer agent should never, ever provide the listing agent or seller a copy of the inspection report. Not a page. Not a screenshot. Nothing at all. It's a pretty big penalty. So don't do it. If any portion of the report is sent over to the listing agent or seller, the buyer can no longer use the inspection contingency to exit the deal and loses the ability to negotiate repairs and credits. There is one exception. If the seller gives written consent, then a copy may be sent to the seller. If the seller were to give consent, they can choose if they want the entire report or the portion of the report that pertains to the repairs being requested. Rounding out the last part of today's training is the additional time clause. The additional inspection time is not a request the seller can deny. The clause states there is a contractual right that is available to the buyer to do the additional inspections if needed. The default amount of time is 5 days. The first inspector must have recommended it in their report. Also, the buyer must ask for the additional time before the deadline on Form 35 in Clause 3 of the Buyer's Notice Clause. A buyer also may not ask for additional inspection time if they have already asked for credits or repairs. They must ask for it the first time around. The buyer does not have to bring another inspector. The buyer is allowed to bring a specialist such as a contractor, roofer, or mold expert. However, the buyer is limited to only looking at the items the inspector recommended for further evaluation in the report.
Be sure to check out our other great training videos inside AQUA University. Hey there, are you watching our training videos but not yet an AQUA agent? We would love to have you. Our 100% commission model, world-class training systems, technology, and marketing make AQUA the coolest and fastest growing brokerage in the Northwest. Go to our website, getaqua.com/careers to learn more. Join the club.